That was a thrilling Spanish Grand Prix that we have just witnessed. So let's dive straight into the review, shall we? Coming into the weekend, every single team, all except Haas, brought upgrades to this Grand Prix. So we didn't really know what we were in for, to be honest. Could teams shoot up the field? Could teams fall down the field? We just didn't know. It was like winter testing all over again, and that made it kind of exciting. There was one small controversy with these upgrades. Aston Martin were accused of copying Red Bull with the design of their side pod and their floor. I will post a link on screen or in the description to my full news video surrounding that if you want to learn more about that situation, but it was a talking point as part of the weekend, so I thought I'd mention it here as well. As we move forward into qualifying, we had the two Williams go out in Q1, the two Aston Martins go out in Q1, which was a small surprise due to that aforementioned copying that we saw. It wasn't expected they'd go out so soon. And we also saw Fernando Alonso go out in his home race in Q1. That was a big shock, a really big shock. Out in Q2, we saw Lando Norris. Norris actually had a top 10 time deleted for track limit, his final timed lap, putting him down to P11 and out in Q2, which actually promoted Mick Schumacher into Q3. Others that went out in Q2 were Esteban Ocon, Zhou Guanyu, and both the Alpha Tauris of Gasly and Tsunoda, which meant both Haas cars made it into Q3 despite no upgrades. How about that? Q3 was actually quite eventful. First off, we had Leclair spin on his first time lap in Q3, which meant he only got one timed lap in Q3. And then Verstappen had a technical issue with his DRS on the final lap, so he didn't set a representative time. This all ended with Leclerc qualifying on pole. He had one lap and he did it in that one lap, so fair play to him. Verstappen's first time lap wasn't good enough for P2 and Sainz came home in P3. We actually saw Russell outqualify Perez for P4. That's interesting, isn't it? Have Mercedes solved their problems after all? As we move into the race, we can talk a little bit more about that. Everyone started on the soft tyres except Hamilton, who started on the medium tyres. At the start, Sainz got away poorly. He had anti-stall. We've seen that with a number of cars, actually more so than we've ever seen before, I think, this season. He slipped down to 5th as a result of that. Perez and Russell touched, but nothing really came out of that in the first corner, so they were running 3rd and 4th for those two. The big incident came further round the first lap where Magnussen and Hamilton touched. Magnussen went off into the gravel and kept going. Hamilton got a puncture and also kept going, but of course they both fell to the back of the grid as a result of that. I think the big winners from the start were definitely Fernando Alonso and Mick Schumacher. Alonso coming from the back of the grid, obviously he made up 5 places, that's brilliant. Schumacher made up 4 places into 6th, which is a hell of a result for that guy. He did have a great start, but he couldn't hold on to it. He did fall down the order, losing places to both Bottas and Ocon in quick succession. We saw Sainz go off the track at turn 4. He lost the back end and went into the gravel. He kept going, but now back down in 11th place. So a terrible home race for him so far. He started off poorly, he went off the track and now is down in 11th. And literally just a couple laps later, we also see Verstappen go off at turn 4 into the gravel. Practically the exact same incident. He only dropped down to 4th because he'd already built up a bit of a gap, but now he's behind Russell and Perez. We did hear that the wind was actually the thing doing that to the drivers. A tailwind was catching the back end of the car and making it slide, so that's why both Sainz and Verstappen went off, they reckon. Norris was apparently very sick coming into this race. He had a bit of a fever and they were trying to keep that down as much as possible, but it didn't seem to affect his racing at all. He made really good progress from 11th starting on the grid past Ricciardo and Schumacher and got his way up to 7th. It was around this time, around lap 10, we started to see a really good fight between Russell and Perez. That's now for 2nd place because Verstappen's fallen behind them both. Russell is now holding up both Red Bulls in this fight for 2nd place and letting Charles Leclerc just extend his lead. It's a really good fight though, it's really entertaining. The first pit stops happen around lap 11 with Sainz, Alonso, Gasly and Zhou all coming in to go onto the medium tyres. This of course starts the little chain reaction we get where everybody starts coming in because they don't want to be undercut or anything like that, except really the front runners. The front runners are still staying out at this point. It's also around this time that Verstappen starts reporting that he's having DRS troubles again, just like he did in qualifying. It's sometimes able to open, but sometimes not able to open. Very inconsistent. He's obviously getting very frustrated over the radio, and it's really holding up his charge to try and get back into second place. Russell and Verstappen do finally pit on lap 14, coming from second and third. They come out in fourth and fifth. Bottas now promoted to third place, but he hasn't pitted yet, I should say that. Perez finally pits on lap 18, mega stint from him, he comes back out in fourth place. At that point, Leclair still hasn't pitted, but he's got a 30-second lead, so when he does finally pit on lap 22, he easily comes out in front of the chasing group. From here on, Russell and Verstappen have a great fight, really entertaining. Like, Verstappen is on his gearbox and will not let go. But that intermittent DRS is hurting Verstappen, and Russell is just doing a fantastic job defending. When the DRS does work, Russell is able to cover him off very effectively, and when the DRS isn't working, he's just not able to get close enough to Russell. This continues for a bunch of laps, but then on lap 28 we get a big one. Charles Leclerc retires. He retires with a power issue. Oh, it's so gutting. He was so far in front, this looked like a very easy win. He was so comfortable, but a power unit issue leads him to retire. He does manage to pull into the pits, there's no safety car or anything like that. But that promotes George Russell into the lead of this Grand Prix. Verstappen is now P2 and Perez P3. Verstappen and Red Bull now see their opportunity. They literally pit a lap later on lap 29 because they're going for the undercut on Russell. He goes onto softs, so he will need to do a third stop, but this will probably get him the lead of the race, right? Once he's out of the way, of course, is Perez trying to take on Russell for that first place, and he does eventually get him. Lap 31, Perez overtakes Russell for the lead of the race. Of course, Perez's DRS is working just fine, so that's kind of proof that the Red Bull did have the pace in there. It was just the DRS that wasn't working correctly that kind of held up Verstappen a little bit. We don't get to see the Russell-Verstappen fight again though, unfortunately. Russell comes in to pit on lap 37. This releases Verstappen into second place, and that Russell pit stop is more about Bottas, I think, than it is Verstappen. Verstappen, I think, was always going to take that position from Russell, so they're not too worried about him, but they are worried about Bottas because he's just sitting around in fourth, waiting to see if anything happens, and just putting in good consistent laps, to be honest. Just to make sure though, Red Bull do pit Perez on lap 38, a lap later, to cover off Russell's stop, just in case there's any worries there. This releases Verstappen into the lead, and at this point it looks like it's an easy Red Bull 1-2. Now we have spent a lot of time looking at the top of the field right now because that was fairly interesting for the first 30-40 laps there. But further down the field, there are interesting things going on as well. We're seeing Vettel running long stints on his tyres to try and recover a good position for Aston Martin. That was very interesting. We saw Alonso consistently moving forward as well. Of course, he started at the back and he's recovering a good position through the pace in his car. And we see Hamilton running quietly but well as well. He's on a different tyre strategy now. Of course, because he tangled with Magnussen, he fell to the back of the field. But he's consistently moving forward as well. So there's some good moves happening all over the place at this point. It's a very overtake heavy race, I noticed, and it was good fun because of it. On lap 45, we had Verstappen come into the pits for his final stop, and he manages to come out just ahead of Russell. So he's in second place, Perez is now in the lead. Sainz also makes his final stop on lap 46. He comes out in 7th, but it'll go to the end on fresh tyres, so it's all about chasing people down for him. And it's at this point where we sadly hear Red Bull employ team orders to put Verstappen ahead of Perez. Perez comes onto the radio, clearly not happy about it, but does accept it. And later, actually after the race, he says we'll chat about this later. Because of course, it's very early in the season to be employing team orders. You're effectively not giving Perez a chance at a championship by employing team orders this early. So I'm sure he'll want to chat with them about that. Russell does his final pit stop on lap 52. He comes out in 4th place, but so now he's got to chase down Bottas, who will not be doing a 3rd stop. So Bottas going to the end on 2 stops. He does indeed do that very quickly though. Russell is back up to 3rd place. Bottas's tyres are looking old, and the last 10 laps are very scary for Bottas as he is hunted down by Sainz and Hamilton. They do both get him, so he slides back to 6th place, and now the battle for 4th place is on between Sainz and Hamilton. Hamilton actually gets that 4th place off Sainz on lap 60, so what a recovery from Hamilton. Not just in this race because he had that incident, he was at the back of the grid, but also from Mercedes overall. They're now tangling with the Ferrari and going toe to toe with it and taking the place off it. But unfortunately, that luck doesn't hold for long as both Mercedes are told in the closing stages to lift and coast because of a DNF risk. We were told on commentary there is a water leak on the power unit, so they had to basically hand that place back to Sainz. Luckily, it didn't affect Russell too badly, but yeah, a bit of a sad one there for Hamilton. He'd fought all the way back to 4th place. It was incredible. And we were looking at a 1-2 for Red Bull and then a 3-4 Mercedes. No Ferrari until 5th place sort of thing. Of course, that does mean Verstappen came home to win the Spanish Grand Prix. Perez came home in 2nd for a Red Bull 1-2, their 2nd of the season. And Russell takes another podium for Mercedes in 3rd. His 2nd for the season as well. Hometown hero Sainz comes home in 4th, as I just mentioned. Hamilton with his cracking recovery in 5th. Bottas still doing amazingly in his Alpha. Of course, 2-stop was not the correct strategy for this race, but somehow he made it work for a 6th place in his Alfa Romeo. Incredible. Behind them came Ocon, Norris, Alonso and Tsunoda to round out the top 10. This result does of course mean that Red Bull take the lead in the Constructors' Championship and Verstappen takes the lead in the Drivers' Championship. So a massive swing in Red Bull's favour this weekend, and especially devastating to Ferrari considering they looked so comfortable with Leclair out in the lead before his power unit failed. So there's been a lot of questions raised from this weekend, especially with the upgrades coming in. Are we seeing green shoots of recovery for Mercedes? It didn't seem like they could challenge the top guys. They couldn't challenge Verstappen. They couldn't challenge Leclerc. But they're now challenging Sainz and Perez, so perhaps something's on there. What do these team orders mean at Red Bull? Are they already playing a tactical game so early in the season? It's got to be gutting for Perez, that. And Ferrari, they've taken gut punch after gut punch, it feels like, in the last couple of races. Can they get back in the fight? So many questions. What did you guys think of the race? Did you find it as entertaining as I did? Let me know in the comments or over on social media at Race Report Pod. Our next race is Monaco, so I'm looking forward to bringing you all the coverage of that one. Stay tuned and I'll catch you in the next one.